This is the Multidisciplinary Evaluation Team MDT report. This is a standard form that's from the state. Most of them that you see, most MDTs that you see will look like this. Some may be a little bit different, especially in the middle where the evaluators have their input, but generally they'll look like this. Here's the date of the MDT, when it was done, what school district, the date of this notice, the parent's name, that would be you, and your child's name. And then this section here is they just make sure that they follow the rules and regulations. The initial verification date, if your child qualifies or not. The testing materials were not racially or culturally discriminatory. That the MDT was completed in a language that most likely gives us information on your child's ability both academically, developmentally, and functionally. If it's not feasible to complete in your child's predominant or native language or other mode of communication, then there needs to be an explanation why. That the materials that were used took into consideration a child with limited English proficiency. That a variety of assessment tools and strategies are used to assist in determining whether the child is a child with a disability and give information of what should be in the IEP. All data obtained from the parent must be considered, and here it has a spot to summarize that data. All instruments that are used have to be validated, that the assessments are administered by trained and knowledgeable personnel, and that the evaluation materials are used for purposes and are valid and reliable. That no single test was given, that there's a number of tests given, including those ones that are tailored to address specific areas that your child may have. The test should be administered so that they really reflect your child's ability, not your child's disability. So to make sure that the key here is to make sure that the test your child's intellectual capability, developmental capability, functionality, rather than testing their disability. So they've got a gear for that. As we stated before, there's no single measurement. There has to be several tests given, and that the child was assessed in all areas related to the suspected disability. And here's some of those areas that they make sure they want to have covered. That the evaluation was sufficiently comprehensive to identify all of the needs, that technically sound instruments were used to assess your child's abilities, that the information used was from a variety of sources, and that these sources were considered in the multidisciplinary evaluation. And finally, a child shall not be determined to be a child with a disability if the real problem is a lack of appropriate instruction in reading, math, or there's limited English proficiency. Really what they're saying is your child must have a disability, not just be behind. After it's ensured that all the boxes are checked, then we go to the verification page on whether your child is disabled or not. If they're not, there needs to be a date on when they're referred to the Student Assistance Team, the SAT team. Now they're referred to them for what's called Response to Intervention, RTI, which we describe more in a later section. So if you want to take a look at it, then you can see what your child is being referred for. And that's just really just some classroom interventions and things like that that can be done without the use of special education and related services. Here's your contact person that you need to contact once they're referred to the SAT team. Now, if your child does qualify, then one of these boxes will be, or he may qualify in more than one area, boxes will be marked, whether he has autism, behavioral disorder, and here's all the list of disabilities. There can be more than one. And then they'll list the primary disability, the one that is affecting your child the most. And then here they'll have the basis for determination. Now this is where the report may get long with input from the different evaluators. They'll generally have a report and it'll be contained in this section. It may be a few pages long. It may be fairly lengthy depending on the needs of your child, but that information will go in here. At the bottom of the page is additional determinations that need to be found if your child has a specific learning disabilities. If you look at the eligibility section of our presentation, you can see more on this, but this just notes other tests that have to be done, and the documentation has to be attached if your child's identified with a specific learning disability. On the final page is the name of the person who's evaluating, their position on the MDT, what they're evaluating for goes in here, and whether they agree or not with the MDT decision. So on the previous page it says the child does not have a disability. Here would be whether they agreed with that. On the previous page it said the child does have a disability. Once again, here is where that would be at. Anyone who disagrees with the team has to file their own written report. That is noted right here, and the report must be attached and why they came to his or her conclusion. Finally, a parent was provided a copy of the MDT report on what date and by whom. Now, once you've got the MDT report, if your child qualifies, then you move on to an IEP meeting. If your child doesn't qualify, there's a couple things there's a couple remedies that you have. One is to request an independent educational evaluation, which we talk about. So you can go to that section, or you can file for a state hearing, due process hearing. That's one option. If you felt like any of the rules or regulations were not followed, then you can also follow a state complaint. But you can look at any of those sections if your child doesn't qualify. If your child does qualify, then like I said, you move on to the IEP team meeting.